There's learning for me here in this conversation. There's learning for me in this very moment that I'm conversing with you. And there's learning when I'm doing some sort of a pose. There's learning when I sit down to meditate. There's learning when I speak with Satya. There's learning when I get on the road here and drive. So once you start looking at not segregating and looking at yoga as an activity, as something that you do on your mat from, I don't know, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., that for me was the switch. So once that switch gets turned on, I think it's hard to turn it back off. Then you start seeing it everywhere. So, to me, what makes people like throwing advanced teacher, and they'll slap X amount of years behind that. Someone could see that very early in their journey. I saw it, I want to say, somewhere around the midpoint in my journey. But someone could see that very early. We have these great masters who have taught no asana and saw that beauty, saw that magic when they were 6 years old. Maybe that's why they're masters. Maybe that's why they were on their way to being enlightened, or close to that. So I think on a teacher's path, the sooner you see that, the more relevant it becomes. It has to become relevant to you.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to MYYT, where you are learning to level up your yoga teaching one masterful class at a time. I don't know if you can hear him, but baby Finn is in the background. And I'm giggling because he's in this funny contraption that's, I guess, a walker. He's hilarious in it. He's figured out that he can, yeah, you're funny. He's figured out that he can walk forwards, but also backwards. This has been a new discovery today, and he will not stop doing it. And it's so funny because his face is so pleased with himself. And so I guess I'm just taking votes to see. He's 9 months now. He started crawling, I guess maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I'm just wondering how long it's going to be until he's walking all around and I will never, ever sit down again. So he's probably making some noises in the background. I've got a cute, cute baby, and I just feel so blessed and so grateful with life. We've officially closed the doors on the Yogipreneur Mastermind. And I had the best time launching. This by far has been the most fun launch that I feel like I've ever done. I truly tried to focus more on bringing tons of value, but focus more on storytelling, which it felt just so much more authentic and easy just to tell you what I've done, just speak from experience. So I had a great time. I'm really looking forward to kicking off the first round of the Yogipreneur Mastermind next week. This weekend was so nourishing. I just had some downtime and snuggled with my baby. Today, Colin and I, we went to a thrift store shop together, which was so fun. Okay, I'm back. I just handed off baby Finn to my husband, who is cooking dinner. All I'm trying to say is I just feel so grateful. This weekend was very much needed. I had a bit of a break after being in creation mode for the free masterclass and then launch mode for the mastermind. So I took off yesterday completely, turned off all the notifications, pretty much just sat on the couch and stared at my baby all day and was just looking at his face thinking, oh my God, he's so perfect and life is so perfect, and thinking how I truly am doing all the things that I dreamt for myself a couple of years ago, and just had one of those moments where I was like, wow, everything that you have right now is something that you prayed for and wished for just a couple of years ago. And so I just want to encourage you, wherever you are in your path and on your journey, to keep going, to keep showing up, because if you keep doing that, it's inevitable that you will arrive where you're trying to go. There's that, is it Lao Tzu? I think that's a Lao Tzu quote where he's like, you might get where you're going if you just don't turn around, if you just don't give up. So keep trucking along, keep showing up, even if it feels messy. I'm so, so proud of you. And speaking of being proud, I'm really proud of my husband. While we've both been in kind of, I guess, creation mode in our own arenas, he has been working on a new show here in Las Vegas with the production company Spiegelworld. Spiegelworld is the company that he already works for with Atomic Saloon, and they have two shows, Atomic Saloon, which he's already in, and then Absinthe, which is kind of the pride of the company. But they're opening a third show, which is called the Disco Show, and he's been in rehearsal for that for about the last 2 or so months. And it was kind of I guess I really could say it wasn't ideal timing, because that meant that he was in rehearsals all day as well as going to shows at night, which meant that he had to leave much earlier in the day. And I had a lot less childcare and help with Finn while I'm also trying to create. And so it has been difficult, to say the least, but so obviously worth it. And now that I'm kind of done with all of my sort of preparation and launching, Colin is also launching, or they are releasing and opening the disco show. They're out of previews and they have just opened the doors to the Las Vegas community. And it was so fun to see the first show and just see kind of what he's working on. And we just went thrift shopping today, actually, and I picked up this cute little number that's basically a disco ball for a shirt. And I can't wait to go and celebrate him. And it's going to be a really good time. So lots of really amazing stuff coming together. Okay, I was listening back to this first draft of Vikram's episode, and I was thinking, oh my God, we sound like what I imagine. I don't really smoke weed. I mean, I tried smoking pot in college, but it's not really my thing. But I feel like we sound like the equivalent of yoga stoners sitting on a couch and going really deep, really fast, and being like, whoa, bro, that's deep. That's what we sound like, is just dropping all of these like mind-blowing concepts, or just diving into yoga philosophy. And it was so fun to re-listen to it. We recorded this a couple of months ago, so I had a really awesome time revisiting the conversation. And truly, I feel like it's perfect for the days that you kind of feel like bogged down or weighed down with the weight of the world, and you kind of are lost in thinking that the world is too broken, there's too many problems, and you're just feeling really down in the dumps. This episode kind of addresses that and provides this yoga philosophy perspective as an antidote to things like nihilism and apathy. And I really appreciate everything that he helped us remember here in this conversation. Inside this episode, we talk about things like how to make yoga philosophy really relevant and applicable in daily life. What did the Yoga Sutras mean by right knowledge? What to do when students ask you questions, and the most profound question you need to ask yourself as a yoga teacher, the 5 remembrances of the Buddha, and topics like finding an authentic voice and avoiding personal burnout. This conversation is so good. I know you're going to love it, especially if you're in need of a little bit of hope and inspiration. This episode is going to bring that positive perspective that you need. So turn it up and let's dive in.
Hey yogis, Mackenzie Fly here, mom, yogapreneur, teacher trainer, retreat leader, and your guide to master your yoga teaching. This podcast is your weekly dose of actionable wisdom and candid chats with industry experts. Learn to connect deeper, weave yogic magic, and lead by example. Full disclosure, I'm still mastering it too, but together we'll skyrocket your impact and income. Hit subscribe and let's grow, one episode at a time. Thank you so much for being here, Vikram. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Always very happy to talk about all things that are yoga related. Sometimes non-yoga too, but mostly yoga related.
I'm right there with you. I am definitely that person who turns every conversation about yoga and have a habit of making sure that we talk about yoga. So I know this is going to be an awesome chat. Would you mind starting by just kind of sharing how yoga found you and your yoga story?
I'll keep it brief because we could record a whole episode on that. But to cut a long story short, I grew up in India, and I pretty much lived in India, started in India, did my undergrad in India, and for all practical purposes, did know yoga how I want to say most of the world would view yoga today. So no matching clothes, no studio settings, no vinyasa classes, nothing structured. It took me a long time to realize that while I was growing up, it was all around me and happening in most of the ways that I teach it now, including asana. It was happening around me. I didn't really have a desire to gravitate towards it, but it was doing its magic in the background. And my grandfather, Satya, after whom my daughter is named, is perhaps my first unofficial teacher. He taught me a lot without ever telling me he was teaching yoga. He was teaching me stuff about life. And I think that's where that seed got planted, that it would be very difficult to separate life from yoga. So ironically, we started by saying we love talking about all things yoga. I mean, what is not yoga? And I know it's it's a popular hashtag yoga everywhere, but it's true. It is everywhere. It just you just have to turn your lens towards being open to that, as opposed to a structured setting that your mind would visually bring up for you. So no yoga till I went for my postgrad to Canada, to Toronto. On my first day of work, my boss, my ex-boss, asked me, quote unquote, if I did yoga because I was Indian. And I said, no, I play cricket. That's what most Indian boys slash men do. And she started laughing. But then I realized that, maybe I'll give it a try. It's really popular, and she seems to think it's the thing to do. So I went. I paid my, I think at that point, $15. Signed up for a trial week. Absolutely fell in love with it. I can picture. It's been a long time ago, but I can picture my first asana class, the studio setting, the smell of benefact everywhere, the silence. Yeah, it was magical. And it took me about 2.5 years to take a step into attempting to try and teach some of it. Yeah, and there's been no looking back since then. I became a full-time teacher at the beginning of 2009, and I've never looked back since then.
Wow. I love that. I love especially the story of your grandfather and making, like you were saying, the yoga more than what most people think of yoga, and that it's like a way of life. And I think that's one of the things that I admired about you when I found you on Instagram, is that it seemed like you were helping everybody understand yoga as a way of life, and yoga in the everyday moments. And you have such a way of making yoga really accessible and making wisdom relevant and applicable. So can you talk a little bit about how you do that with your audience?
It's gonna sound, it's a beautiful, profound question. My answer would not do justice because it's gonna sound very simple, almost like a t-shirt slogan, if you will. You just you teach. You teach from the heart, and you teach everything that you have learned. When I started teaching asana, I had just learned how to teach asana. I had a script, I had cues that I was trying to memorize, a sequence that was, pasted on the back of my water bottle that I would look at when no one's looking. And for the first 3, maybe 4 years, I just taught. I taught at every given opportunity. I taught most times to willing people, but sometimes even to unwilling audience, anybody who I could rope in. Because I was hungry. I was hungry to share that knowledge. And I think that theme has stayed on. I cannot make any claims to saying that I've learned lots or know lots, but I've just started seeing the application of it in my daily life. So talking to you would perhaps, I know it's not in the same setting as an asana, structured asana class. There's learning for me here in this conversation. There's learning for me in this very moment that I'm conversing with you, and there's learning when I'm doing some sort of a pose. There's learning when I sit down to meditate. There's learning when I speak with Satya. There's learning when I get on the road here and drive. So once you start looking at not segregating and looking at yoga as an activity, as something that you do on your mat from, I don't know, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., that for me was the switch. So once that switch gets turned on, I think it's hard to turn it back off. Then you start seeing it everywhere. So, to me, what makes people like throwing advanced teacher, and they'll slap X amount of years behind that. Someone could see that very early in their journey. I saw it, I want to say, somewhere around the midpoint in my journey. But someone could see that very early. We have these great masters who have taught no asana and saw that beauty, saw that magic when they were 6 years old. Maybe that's why they're masters. Maybe that's why they were on their way to being enlightened, or close to that. So I think on a teacher's path, the sooner you see that, the more relevant it becomes. It has to become relevant to you. I can memorize even today in a modern day setting. I can memorize. You could ask me, hey, would you be willing to teach this sequence for me? And it could be a new sequence. There could be some poses that my physical body has not experienced. And I could memorize it, show up, after years of teaching. I'm sure I'll do a good enough job. But there's missing pieces there. There's missing pieces of a non-embodiment, not perfection. Perfection in this genre is samadhi. So just to be clear, the end point is very high, it's very lofty. And most of us aren't really necessarily working towards that. So not perfection, just embodiment. So what makes it practical, what makes it accessible, what makes it relevant is that the person who is teaching you is coming from a place of experience, and then they're willing to share that experience with you, and say and link it back, let's say, to a text, and say, so I had read this text and I had this experience, and it made me think of how they overlap. I hope that's of some value to you, or depending on the setting, how does it play out in your life? In my post, I often ask questions, and that question, sure, of course, is to make sure there's engagement and people are coming and responding. But that's a question I've asked myself, so I'm just paying it forward. So I'm asking it to whoever is wanting to share their response, and it doesn't have to be with me. Can be with themselves, can be with their community, can be with their teachers, excuse me, with their students if they are a teacher.
That's beautiful. I love that. And what you're thinking of makes me, maybe you can remind me of where this is from, because I can't off the top of my head recall. But and maybe it's the Yoga Sutras, but something about the layers of understanding, and the metaphor or the imagery is of fire. And you can see fire, or no, the first one even is before that. It's like somebody can tell you about fire, but you've never seen it. So you believe that it's real because a reliable source is talking about it, but it's not as embedded or embodied in you as seeing fire from afar. And then once you see it, you really believe it. But then even further still, fire until you feel the warmth of the fire, until you cook with fire and eat something and digest that all of those are different layers of understanding and different layers of learning. And that, of course, the direct experience or the lived experience is always the highest. Is this sounding familiar? I can't remember where this is from.
You are spot on. So it's the first vritti, the thought process, the vritti of how do we acquire right knowledge in the world. So that right knowledge can be acquired by, like you said, direct perception, by inference, or by verbal testimony. And you are spot on. As a teacher, my aim, my endeavor is for you to experience that yourself. Only then the fire becomes real. Smoke equals fire, sure, that's inference, but that's secondary. And then I would say this with a pinch of salt, I am not an expert. The experts lived a long time ago, and technology and modernization gave us the privilege of accessing that without not having to do a lot of hard work. I mean, think 4th century BCE or 4th century CE. I leave the debate to the folks in academia. I'm just happy the knowledge is available. When it got codified is not really that important, at least for me. But you and I have that access at our fingertips, in our palm, on our screen. So we can say that, oh, we have that access, but for it to be relevant, there has to be an actual, like you said, a sense perception of it. You can see that play out when people say, oh, you've been practicing yoga for a while, or you tell yourself, I've been practicing yoga for a while. I think I'm changing, because you can feel it. It's a sense perception. And then people say, oh, McKinsey's become so much more calmer. That's the inference. And they say, oh, that calmness comes. So you can make that inference. I bet that calmness comes because of my practice. And then you link it back to the agama, the verbal testimony. That makes sense. Chitta vritti nirodha. That's what I guess this person is saying. So you feel it, you can connect the dots, and then you have faith in the practice. It's not dogmatic. It's not, oh, it's a great book. It was part of your YTT. Memorize it. Why? Don't ask me why. That's the why. Because you can see it play out.
Definitely, it's a big topic though, and I think we all need to cut ourselves some slack, like you say, and like you very humbly admit, like there's no way we could be an expert, especially if people are trying to live a modern life or, engage in having a family and being a householder. It can be, I think that's the most challenging of them all, is to try to be on a spiritual pursuit and have a family and a life, because then all of a sudden you're managing not just your own chaos, but chaos of other people. And it's difficult to be in relationship with yourself, let alone other people, and that makes it a little more challenging.
For sure. As I was saying that to you, when I teach the eight limbs, the Ashtanga, when I go past the fifth limb, I have lesser and lesser to say. My embodiment starts drastically decreasing. I can speak till the cows come home on the yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. I start getting a little shaky. Dharana, dhyan, samadhi. I have very little to say because what I have to say theoretically has already been said very eloquently, very mysteriously, in a very detailed manner, depending on whose commentary you read. Because I don't have much embodiment there. When I'm trying to explain my my take on samadhi, I'm relying on purely words. So I think as teachers to kind of understand that it's a vast body of knowledge. Don't have to master everything. Don't have to be, you know, a genius at everything, an expert at everything, perfect at everything. What you're learning, keep sharing. Even the poses that I teach, I can teach most asana classes on autopilot. I'll say it for what it's worth. I have a good handle on the sequencing. I have a good handle on holding space. It's just the reward of the years of that practice. You know, but that's only one piece of it. While I wanna take credit for putting in the time, for being committed, for being focused, for being good at my job, if you will, I also understand that unlike most jobs, this one, the bar is very high. The end point is very high. It's not a director, a CEO, I don't know, whatever the top boss is in the company. Um, the end goal is very lofty. So curiosity and humility, they both go a long way on this path.
That's a great piece of advice. And to remember that I don't know is also an answer, and it's a good answer. I try to lean into that a lot more too, or remember the power. A lot of my students, I think they get a little bit annoyed with it actually, but when somebody asks me something, I have a habit of just flipping the question back and say, well, how would you actually answer? Not because I'm evading the answer or sometimes I don't know, but I'm just curious to see, before I would say something, what did they already intrinsically know for themselves? And usually I find that their answer is a lot better than probably what I would say anyway.
It's a little cliche, it gets thrown around a lot, sometimes not in the best context, but ask the why. Yoga Journal, Yoga Alliance, a different body, they can give us surveys. I I call people on social media. I can give you a survey result, but it's very important that you have your why. Stats can tell us that X% of people practice yoga because of this. Why do you practice yoga? X amount of people teach yoga because of this. Why do you teach yoga? Because all these all the mysterious answers, that's why I said it's when you think about it, it's not that complicated, but you'll have to create, or one will have to create time to find that why. Or you can just go with the flow. That's an easy one. Both approaches are correct because both approaches are still serving the same person. I have been in both camps. Finished my YTT, wanted to teach a lot, so I did. I never really paused and asked that question: why am I teaching? And only much later, after a lot of inquiry, do I don't want to say some. I have a fairly strong semblance of why I teach and why I practice. And like the whole body of yoga, that answer also keeps evolving with time. This is not a linear path. There is growth and transformation here, and it's linked not just to what's happening on the mat per se, because that unfortunately also has a shelf life. you know Life will happen. Life will happen, circumstances will happen, people will be born, people will die, pandemics will occur. So everything that you can potentially do there has a lot that's not out of your control. and might put a shelf life sooner than you might want it to. I could get injured. I hope not, but I could get injured. So if my why was asana, mobility, flexibility, then I need a new why. I need a more evolved why, and not evolved that it's advanced, more evolved because it's in aligned with my current life circumstances. Because at the end of the day, who am I doing this for? I would hope, I was saying to someone that I would hope that as a result of my actions, I pray every night, I light a candle, that as a result of my actions, my thoughts, it contributes to some sort of semblance and sanity in this crazy world that we live in. I don't know if that happens, but that's my wish, right? That's my global wish, if you will. But otherwise, it's a fairly selfish path. Anything that I'm doing from a why perspective, it's my why. So if you're a teacher, you're a practitioner, very important that you build that relationship with that why. I think it perhaps will be one of the most profound things you could do for yourself as a teacher is having a close relationship with that why.
Completely agree. I was just speaking with a mentee about the same subject, and it is so important. You're also bringing to the surface for me the five remembrances as well. I love how you're talking about the shelf life of the body and how sad on one hand from the human perspective that it is to reflect on impermanence and our that all things die, that all things will get sick, that everyone will also die, but it's not meant to be a downer, or it's not meant to be sad news. And that the interesting thing is the closer you get to death and the closer you get to that, the more alive you start to feel and the more you appreciate, the more present you become too. So it's an interesting exercise to do with yourself, but one that I feel like is an antidote for those times that you are either sleepwalking or you feel very disconnected.
Sometimes I think not just mine, but everyone's mind is filled with random trivia. As you were saying that about it being a downer, you know, a thought popped in my head. Why is it called a Debbie Downer? Like, why do all the Debbies of the world got stuck with "Don't be a Debbie Downer"? I'm sure there'll be some answers if I Google it. Um, but anyway, that thought popped in my head. I'm like, why did Debbies get stuck with being a Debbie Downer? But
Sorry, Debbie's out there listening.
yeah, I'm sorry. My apologies as well. But on that same note about the impermanence of life and I guess the morbidity of death, is the flip side is 8.4 million living species, and only one of them is to be human. So the flip side is you, I, and anyone who is in a human body won the lottery big time. Think about it, 8.4 million species. I don't play the lottery, so I don't know what the big jackpot odds are, but those are crazy odds that out of that big a sentient being population, you and I got to wear this suit. Because this suit is the only one that comes with the desire to be liberated, that comes with the desire to develop discernment, that comes with the desire to change the cycle of karma. Everything is not predetermined for us because we have these brief moments of free will. No one else has it. You could love your pet to death, but they don't have it. Outside of food, shelter, sex, they're not really interested in unraveling other mysteries of the world, no matter how playful, smart, engaged they are. But you and I have that option. We have that chance, depending on what your beliefs are about karma, but we'll leave that for a different time. But you and I have that chance. You and I have that option to do something to change the trajectory. So while everything is impermanent and things will, you know, grow and die and fall apart and come together around us, we do have a large say in it. We all don't have the same start. You can look around you in your circle, people that you know virtually or otherwise. We all don't have the same start. You and I don't have the same start in life. But you and I, by using this body of knowledge, of discipline, whatever you want to call it, we can use that as a very strong guiding force to make the most of our time here, which is very liberating. So sometimes when I get stuck in that place of What's the point? And, the spiral starts. I remind myself, well, I actually can do something about it. Might be very minuscule or could be super grand, but I can do something about it. And not everybody can say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's really inspiring. And it's such a good question too to always ask yourself like what is the meaning of all of this and make I think as humans and as people that is the interesting sauce and juice of life is that we are meaning makers and nothing everything is really meaningless on one side or it's totally meaningful and we're the ones that are imbuing that object or that relationship that thing with the meaning so it's just we're getting really philosophical here. Are you feeling stuck? If so, this is your exclusive invite to Vortex Yoga Retreat in Sedona, Arizona, this October 11th through 14th, 2024. Sedona's breathtaking red rocks transform into a fiery masterpiece in the autumn. Imagine practicing yoga amidst this stunning backdrop, feeling the ancient vortexes amplify your intentions and awaken your spirit. This retreat is for you if you crave a deeper connection with your energetic body, the chakras, you're ready to align your life with purpose and passion, or you seek a transformational experience to unleash your inner power. Here's what awaits you: 4 days and 3 nights nestled in Sedona's beauty, daily yoga and meditation, delicious local dinners, sound healing, hiking to infamous Sedona vortexes, connection with like minded souls on this empowering journey, learn chakra balancing principles and practices, and a special gift from your hosts. Don't wait. Space is extremely limited and spots are going fast. Visit rachakaretreats.com/Sedona to book your spot and choose your accommodations, or click the link in the show notes. Use code MYYT for 10% off. Are you ready to balance your energy and align your life?
People ask, so, like I'm really interested in yoga philosophy, but it's so daunting. I don't speak Sanskrit. You don't need to. You can, you should, if life allows you to, but you don't need to. As a kid, I had to study Sanskrit in school. I would run away from it. And the only reason why I stuck with it is because Sanskrit, unlike, let's say, Hindi or English, like any other language, it's those languages are subjective. Sanskrit is not subjective, it's objective. You can get 100% in Sanskrit. You would have to be a genius to get 100% in English. No one got 100% on their English papers. You'd get 97, 98, depending on something in that if you were really good. Sanskrit was perfect to balance out your average, if you will. And that's the reason why most of us stuck with Sanskrit, you know. But look, so anyway, so if you're interested in yoga philosophy, if stuff like this piques your curiosity, if you wonder what is beyond open hamstrings and I don't know, loose hips or whatever one is aspiring for, what is beyond that? Beyond that is just life, and it can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. So I tell people, don't let it intimidate you. Don't let the language barrier intimidate you. Don't let the whole word of philosophy, like, see you next month. you know
Yeah.
no, it's real. It's as juicy. I have a friend. She, for her, anything that's to do with vinyasa slash flow class has to have the prefix juicy. So it's as juicy as any of those classes can be. And I know what she means when she says that was a juicy class. All of these conversations, they can be as juicy and full of life and invigorating as you want them to be. Don't get stuck in the sutra. If you know the sutra, great. You pronounce the sutra, great. Work with a reliable translation of the text so you don't go too far from what the original intent is. Work with a teacher or a group of teachers or a community that is coming from that place of embodiment of experience, and then find the relevancy. That's the best way I can say that. Find the relevancy to you. That's the beauty of it. That book was written, or those books were written a long time ago, but they spoke to people. They weren't written for chat gpt or for bots. They were written for the people who lived at that time, who had similar problems, or who had problems, I want to say, like we have problems. We have different problems. They had different problems, but it was written as a way to end suffering. So if any part of you thinks that, oh yeah, I think, sign me up for this less suffering in my life, then go ahead, dip your toe, or take a deep dive wherever you are, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And I mean, of course, life is suffering. It's one of like the first things that you kind of learn, and that we're creating this suffering hilariously. But I love, and that's really what you do. That's something that I noticed is that again, here we're talking about what we were mentioning in the beginning of making it relevant and that's so good. It's so good. Asking like how is this showing up for you and what can we do about it? What is something that is relevant, I guess, for your community? What do you feel like you're currently either hearing a lot from your either students or the people that follow you on Instagram? Is there some sort of like reoccurring theme that seems to be we're all playing out the same story, just different variations of it? And is there's something that's coming up in that sense?
It's since it's at the top of my mind, I just, done like a very basic survey for some of the folks who I'm connected with on social media, specifically if they teach. And it's interesting. A lot of teachers kind of categorize some of their main challenges being avoiding burnout as a yoga teacher, and authenticity, finding an authentic voice as a teacher. And the third one was continuing education. Um, that seemed to be a little lower, relatively speaking, in the top three, but those were the top two: the authenticity piece and avoiding personal burnout. They were the top two. And I think that does make sense. That does make sense because this world that we live in sometimes is not very kind, but the path we have chosen, or the service that we have chosen to be a provider of, an ambassador of, a messenger of, sometimes doesn't make sense. Everything that I'm trying to teach, everything that I'm trying to embody, everything that I've learned seems to be in contrast with how the rest of the world is operating. If I would like to say that, if I strongly believe in nonviolence and compassion and interconnectedness, that's, you don't have to not see the news. It's everywhere. It's a reality. You can shut your eyes and pretend it doesn't happen, but it's still happening. Our world is very violent, just generally speaking. So I can see why that might take a toll on someone. It can take a toll on someone out of a place of desperation, wanting to give up, not believing in themselves or what they're saying. And that makes sense that it's also linked to authenticity. Here I am trying to preach about all these. Yes, ahimsa, it's great. Oh, right, okay. Oh, wow. Like, is anyone listening? Is anybody actually following any of this? Does any of this actually make sense? But it does. But it does. So I can see why those two would be on the forefront. It's been on the forefront for me as well. While all of this happens, that's the other thing. While all of this happens, life hasn't stopped its own share of ups and downs for, let's say, me specifically. Let me just speak about myself. So here I am trying to be an ambassador of all things, but everyone's world is falling apart, including my own, or it seems like in some moments. And you might question the fairness of it, the efficacy of it. Is it even ethical? Well, if I'm doing all of this, why is the classic? Why is this happening to me? But I don't know about other YTTs, but mine didn't come with a guarantee that said that I was immune to all of this. It hopefully started the journey of giving me the tools and the resources that I've thankfully stuck with over the years, that are helping me find that safety net, if you will. So yeah, those two conversations on the forefront: how to make sense of it all sometimes when it doesn't make sense, and how to stay true, how to stay authentic. And there's the whole other aspect of, the modern day evolution, or the appropriation, the inclusion, or the exclusion, if you will. Yeah, For something that is supposed to be very zen, this profession has its shares of challenges. Let me put it this way.
Yeah, yeah, especially if you have the curiosity, like you mentioned in the beginning, to ask, it can feel like, well, that's opening a can of worms or like a big subject. But it's important, and that's one of the purposes of this podcast is to provide a space to continue asking questions and exploring answers and hearing from everybody's point of view because everybody has a piece of the puzzle. My teacher used to describe it like there's a elephant and one person might be standing at the front kind of touching. Is there that classic image of touching the tusk, and he's describing the elephant, and then the other person is standing at the back of the elephant and it's touching the tail, and both sound really different in their descriptions, but they're describing the same beast, the same giant animal. They're just coming at it from a different direction, and both are right. Not one is not wrong. It's just different. So that image always really helps me when it comes to, it's always worth listening to other people, and it's always worth staying open to learning from one another, and that you're the one who misses out. You're the one who loses if you decide to think that you're done, that you're done growing, and that other people don't have something to offer you in your growth.
For sure. Yeah, I'll go back to something that we spoke about earlier, right? The shelf life for being flexible outside of your physical body, it's infinite. I say infinite because theoretically we know it as samadhi. So I'll just say infinite. So the potential to explore flexibility or non-rigidity or stiffness, any of those words, outside of your physical body. I mean, come on, if you're ever bored, there you go.
That's a great point. Another thing you were kind of saying makes me think of, well, if I allow myself to contemplate kind of all these sad things or bigger topics, like if I'm being compassionate, I guess is what it is that then if I suffer with, which is compassion, empathy, then I will be stunted into inaction because I'm feeling that suffering. When really I feel like the training at least that I got around this topic was that no, it's not that there is this sadness or this compassion that makes you not want to do something. It's actually very inspiring to take action. It doesn't make you feel like you don't want to participate or just go into a ball and be like, oh, that's the way it is for me and for others. But it's actually very inspiring.
No, it's true. It's so true. You'll hear me say this often. Inaction is not an option. You have just physically immobilized your body. But what's happening on the inner landscape? Nothing is still. By virtue of this primordial nature of existence, nothing is still. Nothing. Things are moving. Maybe not on the surface. Maybe not visible to the naked eye. So inaction is never an option. So we would like to think that, oh, if I curl myself up, if I don't see it, if I don't do anything, no, it's still playing out. So I think empower yourself, take the reins, empower yourself, take the reins, and see what is it that you are capable of doing. Everyone's journey in things that are related to yoga will be very different. Will have a different take on how they partake in the world outside when it comes to ethics, when it comes to activism, when it comes to social justice. So see how does that play out for you, and make peace with that. Don't compare that to someone else's journey. Don't feel guilty that you're not doing as much as that other person, or don't sit on a high horse and say, oh, I'm doing so much more than this other person. It is, I said it before, I'll say it again. There is community, there is sangha, there is interconnectedness, but this is a solo journey. It's a ticket for one. Figure out your why, and act in accordance with that, and support whoever you can on the way. But really, really be very clear about your own why. Otherwise, you can spend hours trying to solve and serve other people's problems.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about the fire and the flame. No one else can do it for you either. You can have really good teachers who can kind of point the way, but it will never be embodied, as you say, unless you do it yourself. So I really love that you're highlighting and making it so clear that it is a solo journey, but it is also easier done in community and with support because it's a hard path to walk.
100%. That's where I'm a big fan of modernization, technology. People who lived then did not have that advantage. We do. So while I'm all about technology, yada yada yada, but there's also good stuff thanks to that. Look at us, you know, geographically thousands of miles away in different time zones, but connected, having a meaningful conversation that is of service to us and hopefully of service to a lot of other people, at any point that it touches their lives. So yeah, let's see how can we make this work for us. Do we know that things sometimes can spiral? Yes, but we still have a say in it, right? We still have something that we can do about it. That's why I say inaction is not an option.
Yeah, a way to bring some hope back into it. Sometimes it can feel like there's not, or that what you do doesn't matter. So that's amazing. With what's coming up in your community of this burnout or authenticity, it does kind of seem, I guess, at first glance, like that's something, at least the authenticity part, that people struggle with in their beginning journey of taking seat of teacher or trying to get started in this career of sharing from a place of service. And then the burnout part is kind of on when you've been doing it for a while. Like, how do you, you even said at one point, I could do this on autopilot or with my eyes closed, especially teaching like a yogasana class. So that's interesting that it would be those two sides of getting started, or you've been doing it, and how do you stay inspired, and how do you keep that spark?
Me personally, I think just understanding that a beginner's mindset, it's easier said than done. It gets harder when you start knowing stuff. Just a beginner's mindset. You realize the vastness of it. There was this video that was floating around some time back, something about like a woman who's lying on like a bed of grass, on a field of grass, and it kind of goes from her eyeball all the way up into like the galaxies, kind of emphasizing how vast or how minuscule she is when she was being looked at from this camera that was, I don't know, somewhere up in the galaxy. But you get the point. That's how tiny, that's how little. Till the time the internet connected us, we did not know. So I mean, not that we know, but not we know of. We have a way of knowing of it. It never fails to blow my mind how big the world is and how many people are there and how many sentient beings are there. So I think just that's what inspires me. What inspires me is I can never get too cocky about it. I can choose to be, but I would be a hypocrite then, if I'm being very honest. I think that's what inspires me. What inspires me is a desire to explore, to be curious, and a desire to share. I really like sharing. I really like bringing this to people in any way that I can. Doesn't matter what hat they wear in their other non-yoga life. um, you don't have to be some committed practicing 6 7 days a week practitioner. You could just be whoever, as anonymous or as famous as you want to be. So I like that. I think sharing and the curiosity and the desire to learn more, that's what keeps me inspired.
Well, you definitely exude that, and I can see that even from the 1,000 miles away that I am, that's how you show up, and that's the energy that you bring, and it's very inviting, I think, because of that you're very generous in how you share your understanding. So I really appreciate it, and I know that so many others do too. With your yoga mentorship that you provide and the past yoga teachers that you've worked with, have you noticed a theme that those yoga teachers struggle with, or what is a way that you've kind of helped yoga teachers in that type of relationship that might serve some of the listeners here?
Being a mentor, to ask those questions, to really have them sit with that feeling of discomfort sometimes, to create spaces where that discomfort doesn't come from a place of you owe me this answer. Technically, you paid me the course fees, you don't owe me anything else. You have the recordings, you have access for life. Maybe you'll never speak with me ever again. You're like, this teacher's not for me. So technically you don't owe me anything. um, but creating that space where if one is curious to explore more, to go deeper into the why, to go deeper into I don't want to say the meaning of life, but the meaning of this moment that's unfolding, that's unraveling. Like, what are the answers there? So I want to say learning in community, and then kind of doing some housekeeping work on cleaning up some concepts that maybe that weren't clear during the YTT. Um, yeah. So a little bit of academia and theory, but mostly spaces of exploration coming from a place of personal experience. I don't teach quantum physics. I didn't go to school for that. I have zero qualifications to teach that. So I'm not trying to explain the Big Bang theory or how the universe came into being. I don't really have much interest in that. But explaining how is it that these things that we study in a text, in conversations, how do they play out? How can we find a cohesive relationship and then an individual relationship? And how's that going to impact the rest of your life you're teaching? And then some practical stuff as well. What we do has many layers to it, right? I mean, it's important to be able to safely guide a class. It's as important as asking the deeper questions. So yeah, a little bit of both. I think it's the continuity which I think I've gotten the most positive feedback for, a nurturing community where the continuity of learning does not stop.
It can be, I guess, a hard kind of space to foster, especially the type that you mentioned, where as a teacher, you are appropriately prodding or poking or pushing on buttons that need to be pushed on. And that's something that I hear my teachers saying, is that sometimes actually the best teachers do that. They bring attention to where some wounds is, not in a way that's to harm, but to show like this is still a spot, this is still where work can happen, and it's through that wound, through that crack, that like light is kind of coming through. And how to do that in a way that is for their transformation, for their enlightenment, for their coming home to themselves. But knowing that it's not always your job as a teacher to continue to allow your student to feel good or to make them feel really good, because as you mentioned, life and its vicissitudes doesn't always feel good. And the practice also is not here to just make you feel good all the time, because that's also not real. It's interesting. So with your retreat, you kind of mentioned your online courses, and you're like, you have the access, you may or may not, but how else do you kind of serve people? And can you share with listeners a little bit about what you've got going on as far as your courses and your retreats and everything?
Yeah. So some self-paced courses. That to me is always a good way to put all of my thoughts together in a structured manner. I can be very unstructured. So it's good for me to put those thoughts together in a structured manner with a clear intent. So, I don't know, yoga philosophy 101. I'm brand new. I'm not sure where to start. Everything seems daunting. Okay, let's take a step back. So that's my way of thinking, just things that I've heard in the years of teaching, and how can I put that together so it serves me from the purpose of a livelihood, but then it also helps the other person. There's a specific thing that I want to do. That's why I create these courses, because then it helps me focus on a specific thing, if you will, that someone's asked me, that they're like, okay, I would like to learn more about that. So self-paced courses, mentorship program, um, thinking about dipping my toes into a YTT. I do a lectures for a lot of YTTs. Have never really offered one of my own. Still exploring that. So who knows? Maybe at some point would like to do that. I do retreats in India, and I am going to take a retreat to Nepal in the third week of October. It's a place that's very close to my heart. Very, very, very much steeped in culture, in history. Has a big yogic connection and the access to nature. I feel the most inspired, fulfilled when I'm in nature, and I got a glimpse of that when I was there the last time. So want to share that.
Oh, beautiful. Well, I wish I could come on the one in Nepal with you. I was meant to go to India. I guess it would have been 2020. And then of course, that those plans changed. So still haven't been able to make it out, but maybe in our future, there'll be an actual collision of in-person introduction. So where can everybody find you on Instagram, or what's the best way to plug into your community? Is it just to visit your website? And
I feel that's the new business card. hey, what's your Instagram handle? That's what I get asked the most. So yeah, Instagram handle, it's at Wandering Mad, the same name for the website, wanderingmad.com. Yeah, and then yeah, pop by, say hello, send a message. I work for myself. I'm a one person corporation, if you will, or a one person business. So yeah, so when you message me, I'll write back to you, or when you email me, I'll email you back. So yeah, this is an open invite. If something's on your mind, you want to ask a question, you want to share, you just want to pop and say hi, please, by all means, I would love to hear from you.
No, and I can say just from my own direct experience that he's very accepting to all invitations, obviously, for accepting the invite to be here. So I got so much out of this conversation. I hope you did too, Vikram, and everybody listening. Thank you so much for being here and continuing to be curious and see what else there is to learn from other people. Until next Wednesday, have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks for listening. If this is your first time, peruse our feed to see if there's something else that will serve you. We're so grateful that you're here and invite you to join our inner circle by subscribing to our newsletter. If this episode resonated with you, help us spread the word by sending it to a friend who needs to hear this message. Likes, follows, sends, shares, and reviews help us to continue delivering high-quality content to you for free each and every week. Don't forget to tag @MasterYourYogaTeaching so we can reshare. I am a certified yogi. However, this podcast is intended for information and entertainment only. If you are interested in mentorship or coaching with me, check out the website linked in the show notes to get more information. This content and other content produced by CLW Studios and affiliated partners is not therapy, and nothing in this content indicates a therapeutic relationship. Any opinions of guests on the podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of Mackenzie or CLW Studios. Learn more about Mackenzie, her guests, and CLW Studios by following the links in the show notes. Keep shining, and we will see you next Wednesday for another dose of Master Your Yoga Teaching. Namaste blessed.